Okay. We just before we get started, just so everybody knows, as Anita just said, she's putting this on YouTube, so we are out there to the world, and it's also being recorded. So just so everybody knows, we are streaming and being recorded. So yeah, June 25th meeting of Downtown Advisory Board. We'll start with roll call, but just before we do, we have a new member we want to welcome, Charles Weathers. Charles, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, would you mind, just for everyone's benefit, just giving us just a little bit of background of who you are and how you're connected to downtown?
Yeah, definitely. I've lived in Salem and Kaiser all 37 years of my life, and have visited the Downtown Advisory Board a few times and seen all the important work that you guys are doing. Recently purchased and renovated 440 State Street into 440 Food Hall. And just want to be part of the conversation and help continue to make downtown great.
Awesome, thanks. We're glad to have you here, Charles.
Welcome.
You need to say something? Oh, I think the cat's locked. You go down there.
And 440 is awesome, by the way. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's been there. The food was good. The atmosphere was great. It's, I think, well received. Good job, Charles. All right. Okay. Let's get going here with roll call. Joshua K. Aaron Turpinning, I'm here. Hillary Holman Kidd.
Here.
Thank you. Ben Chinzo Maduri. Haven't seen him yet. Tyson Giza.
Present.
Brad Compton.
Present.
Thank you. Scott McLeod wasn't able to get on. Linda Nishioka.
Present.
Dana Vuktavine.
Live and in person, present.
Lori Miller.
Here.
And Charles Weathers.
Present.
All right, thanks everybody. So let's see, where's my agenda? We got, first of all, we need an approval of the agenda. Need a motion for that.
Move to approve.
Thank you,
I
Dana.
second.
And thank you for the second. Who was the second?
Linda.
Linda, thanks. All right, any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed? It's okay to be opposed, Charles.
No. Aye.
Okay. All right, and approval of the minutes for March 12th. I also need a motion for that.
Move to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Dana.
And I'll second. Linda.
Thank you. And all those in favor say aye.
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 And opposed? All right. We have no action items, so moving right along to information reports. And welcome, Mayor and Councilor Hoy. We're really grateful to have you guys here. I know we've had some really robust discussion in our group about homelessness over the years. And in our last budget review, homelessness, of course, came up again. So we're just really excited to hear what you guys have to say. And I think we'll have a little bit of time for question and answer afterwards. So if everyone could just listen until the mayor and Councilor Hoy are done, then we'll move on to questions. Did I say that right, Sheree? Is that,
Yes, but can
the
you
idea?
make sure and acknowledge Councilor Kaiser too?
oh yeah, yes, that's right. And Councilor Kaiser, thank you for being here. I know you're eating lunch, okay. Thanks. All right, I'm gonna mute myself.
Are you,
I wasn't aware that I was being asked to speak. Nobody mentioned that. I just got a meeting invite. So I didn't come with any prepared remarks. Mr. Mayor, I hope you are.
I'm ready.
That covered.
Hey, Chris,
You mentioned that. to me.
I think what I'll do is I'll kind of give just kind of a quick, a broad look at how we're looking at downtown, and then Chris really has been our person associated most with the Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance, and he can really put this into a larger or a broader perspective.
This is Kristen, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted to offer, if you would like me, just for everybody on the call, to kind of give a reminder about why this was on the agenda coming out of budget, I'm happy to do so. If you want to just begin, please do. But I just wanted to offer that if you are interested in me kind of setting that stage.
Okay, I'll go ahead then. Generally, what we're looking at is how the city is responding right now under the COVID-19 pandemic, and then how we will respond or continue the programs moving forward. Realize that all of the discussion occurs inside of the council's strategic goals on affordable housing, homelessness, and social services. If you haven't had a chance to look at the strategic goals, that's really the kind of overview planning policy document we work with. And then working very closely with the Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance and its strategic plan. And that sets up the framework of our discussion. Generally, what we've got is a situation where we have unsheltered camping in designated park areas where we're offering restroom and we're feasible a security presence. Right now, those two areas are in Wallace Marine and out at Cascade Gateway Parks. Broadly, our program is a Housing First program. We are trying very hard through our Housing Rental Assistance program to be moving people, particularly the hardest to house, from unsheltered status into housing, and then offering the wraparound services to assist them in moving forward in their lives. And we're having fairly substantial success, although the numbers are just overwhelming. I mean, we're dealing with one person at a time as we have hundreds of people at a time living without a home. So it is a complicated and difficult issue. We found that we are really concerned about the impact of homelessness in our downtown, as you were, as anyone who is doing business or trying to shop downtown. Particular areas of the downtown were really dramatically affected. We took a look at that as the pandemic broke out, and we passed an emergency order that essentially set up a no more than two people on the sidewalk, essentially clearing our sidewalks, but offering a place to go, and that was over or out in the parks. We are continuing that. We have continued last meeting the emergency order. I think its effect is essentially a sit-lie ordinance. We're offering a place for them to stay in the same accommodations. We are going to have to deal with this as we continue to move forward. So we're also looking at a variety, and Chris is the president of our housing authority and can talk about these probably in much better detail, but we have a couple of shelters coming online to deal with various specific individuals. You're probably aware of the Quinna Shelter, which is still out in time right now, but we're in the process of putting that together out at the Old State Hospital. There's Redwood Crossing out on Fisher Road. We are looking at the old DMV site, and probably will be, I think we may have already agreed to redevelop the DMV site on Portland Road into a more substantial shelter space. And then we're looking generally in the downtown area for another shelter location and navigation center, as well as other services. Obviously, our primary partner in most of this is Jimmy Jones, and he can talk about the Community Action Agency's role in these various projects. But we continue to move ahead. We do not have enough housing. We continue to have a very strong policy of housing development and trying to develop more affordable housing. But it is a work in progress. It has always been a work in progress in Salem. There is no reason to believe it won't continue to be a work in progress in Salem, and one that is very troublesome to our community, very troublesome to us in public office. And I know it's more than troublesome to businesses affected by the impact of homelessness on their businesses, particularly if it gets just absolutely out of hand, as it did prior to our clearing the sidewalks earlier this year. So, Chris, do you want to talk about kind of some of the other initiatives and what's going on in this?
Sure. I'm Chris Hoy. I represent Ward 6, which is basically from the state hospital east, everything that's in the incorporated areas of Salem, East Salem. So, but I'm also, like the mayor said, the chair of the Salem Housing Authority, and also the vice chair of the Mid-Willamette Valley Homelessness Alliance with Mayor Kathy Clark from Kaiser, who's the chair. And that is a coalition of folks from Salem, Kaiser, Monmouth, Independence, Polk County, Marion County, the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. There's probably another entity in there I'm not thinking. Oh, the school district. There may be one or two other entities I'm not remembering, but that's a group. Basically, it's not to get too far into the wonky details, but several years ago, locally, there had been a decision made to disband what we call the Continuum of Care, which is an entity designed to garner resources from federal resources from HUD for housing initiatives. And we, for whatever reason, several years ago, they disbanded our local one and we joined what they called the remainder of the state. And so we were in a coalition with, I don't recall the number of counties off the top of my head, Jimmy would know, but it's probably over 25 other counties. And we just kind of became a part of this large mix. And so garnering federal resources in the Marion Polk area became very, very difficult because we really just kind of got a little piece of what was left. Well, a couple of years ago, we started the initiative to basically take back our power in relation to the continuum of care and create our own local entity, and it's a Marion and Polk region specific. And so what this will allow us to do is to apply for federal resources that we can target specifically as that 2-county region and really direct them towards initiatives that we see will benefit housing and homelessness initiatives here locally. And that's really going to give us a lot more control than we've had in a long, long time. So that first wave of funding will be in the upcoming year, where we've just been doing the formulation of all of that. But we really have a lot of groundwork laid. We have engaged Janet Carlson in a private capacity once she left her position as a county commissioner, and she has helped us navigate through that system quite well. And so very excited to be a part of that and to see what that's going to bring. It's really going to well establish our region into the next decade in terms of services and resources. The mayor mentioned Quinna Hall, and Kristen could probably speak in more detail than I can, but that'll be it's the old nurses' quarters on the state hospital grounds. It's the building there just to the north of the Dome building. So it's on the north side of Center Street, and it's one of just 2 buildings left on the north side there. And we're in the process of purchasing that, and that'll become a facility for really the hardest to house individuals with mental illness and other issues. It'll have wraparound services and all sorts of resources, kind of a coalition of groups coming together to provide services there. Also out on Fisher Road, north of Silverton Road, where it goes back into the city out there, where we've purchased a building that was a partially completed long-term care or type facility. Somebody had been building it, and they got it about, I think, maybe 75% done. And for whatever reason, the project stopped, and it sat vacant and they're unfinished for a few years. And so we were able to purchase that as the housing authority, and we'll be using that for permanent supportive. I think it's permanent supportive housing. It's long-term. This is permanent supportive housing. So we're not talking about a shelter. We're talking about basically single units for people to live, and it'll have on-site resources available to folks to help case manage them. We're also partnering with Salem Health, and we'll be leasing some of the I think it's 6 beds out to them. I appreciate Jimmy's nods. He's affirming some of my a little bit unclear statements, so appreciate that. 6 beds to Salem Health for respite care for folks getting out of the hospital who currently either end up staying in the hospital longer because they don't have a place to go because they're homeless. And we're talking people generally in the hospital for physical health reasons. They don't have any place to go, so they either end up taking up a really expensive hospital bed, or they go out on the street and really jeopardize their health. And this will give them a place to actually go and recover and be healthy until they can get stabilized and then transition into one of our other programs. So those are some of the things that we have going currently aside or in addition to what the mayor was talking about. And I'd be happy to answer any questions about that or other things.
Yeah, thank you. That was great. Kind of the broader picture of how the city's addressing homelessness. And one of the things that's kind of a question in my mind, and I think others on the board, Mayor, you mentioned that the numbers are, they're overwhelming in housing. We're getting more and more units, but the numbers are even greater than what we can put up. And then I've also heard of that there's vouchers out there that go unused because there's not enough units. Chris, could you speak to that as far as the Salem Housing Authority? Like, I guess where I'm going is one of our goals for downtown is more housing. And part of that, I think it would be low income housing or other types of temporary housing, maybe for unsheltered people. So I think I'm trying to formulate a question here. If we just built units, let's say, and said, here you go, housing authority, would you be able to use those, or how does that work?
So let me speak in some general terms, and I'm sure Jimmy or Kristen will follow up with some really good detail. But so we're always looking to build affordable and low income housing. In fact, we just we authorized a program with a single property. We're not calling it urban renewal anymore. We're calling it
Tax increment district.
Tax increment district. Thank you. A single property tax increment district with Mountain West on the old hospital, the North Campus. And so we are going to be abating their taxes for a period of time, and they will be building, I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but it's several units of affordable housing within a market rate housing complex. It's a really great partnership, and the only way that those projects can ever really pencil out is if we help out with some sort of tax abatement or incentive to help build those. And we are happy to do that anytime we have a partner come alongside ready to do that. And so we just did that at not this recent meeting, but the meeting prior, and approved those. So those will be coming online soon. In terms of vouchers, that and this is where Jimmy will help me out with the detail, but I think probably what you're speaking to is our HRAP program, which is our Housing Rental Assistance Program, which is traditionally we've had difficulty finding enough landlords to get all the people that we would like to get housed. And that we've done a lot better. Our staff has worked really hard at getting a lot more landlords involved. And so that, I think that's a little bit of an older issue, but Kristen looks like she has the detail to back me up.
So that is true with HRAP. It has also been an issue with vouchers, in part because there are rent limits associated with vouchers, and the market rate rents have gone through some pretty rapid increases. So the Housing Authority has worked with HUD, and they've made some adjustments so that we have been able to use the vouchers that we have, increasing those voucher amounts. And now we're in the process of trying to secure more vouchers to make those available in the community. Oh.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Before we maybe keep moving with this discussion about homelessness and hear from Jimmy, did anybody have any more questions just specifically on this first part of the discussion for Dana? Go ahead, Dana.
Just a clarification on how long the emergency order is extended to. Is it indefinite, or is there an end date regarding
End
the
of August.
sidewalk and camping?
Current end date is, I believe, the end of August.
Thank you.
I don't have a question, but maybe a comment for Dab is, if you'll remember back pre-pandemic, we had actually passed an ordinance and it went through second reading for sidewalk, the sidewalk ordinance. And this was the idea that you could say there's no sitting or lying on the sidewalk as long as the city could provide some daytime shelter. To my knowledge, and maybe Kristen has the only established trees on here too, but to my knowledge, that's still in place. We went through what we needed to amend our ordinances, and it went through second reading, and that is still a thing. So when we do come out of our emergency order, that is still on the table. Now, I know we've been just sidelined a bit with the pandemic and things have changed, but that is still something that's going to be the law for our city. So, and I don't know, Kristen, if we've looked at that recently as far as the shelter for offering shelter during the day, or I have no idea where that is on staff's radar right now.
Yeah, so Gretchen has started to pick that back up, recognizing that we're coming to an end of the emergency order. So she's looking at, what the next steps are to provide the additional, we talked about, covered tent space at Marion Square Park or other options for the day shelter. Another thing that we have coming online that doesn't specifically address that, but does provide additional resource, the mayor alluded to early on, and that is shelter space that will be out at the Zamora dealership that the North Gateway Urban Renewal Area is in the process of acquiring. There are some DEQ environmental constraints to that site that will limit its shelter use to 18 months. So we are working with Arches to prepare that site for shelter capacity starting. I think we're looking at October as the time frame to start that, so we can get through 2 winter seasons. And that will be providing overnight shelter out in that area. And the hope is that this will also be pulling some people away from the downtown to shelter in that location.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. So next on our report, so to speak, it's the, sorry, Councillor Hoy, I think this is an informal discussion, but yeah, what you did share was excellent. I think it's good for all of us to hear as we're, I think, as you know, the downtown businesses who many of us represent here and also are just our friends and and colleagues are constantly sort of asking us questions about all this. And so as informed as we can be, the better. So appreciate it. Go ahead, Chuck.
Thank you, Aaron. I just wanted to check, see then, is our part of the meeting over at this point? I need to keep moving. I just wanted to check.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you have other commitments, we understand. I know from our past discussions, without you here, there's been a lot of questions that have come up that we haven't really got to yet around.
That's
this
why
issue.
we're here.
Yeah. So I guess maybe, hopefully I'm not overstepping here a little bit. I'll just kind of explain a little bit for your benefit before we move on. But
And
so
Aaron,
as
if I
we
could just say, I'll
yeah,
be able
please.
to stay for the whole meeting. So
Okay.
I don't have any time.
Yeah, I would just like to know if there's any questions you have that I need to be dealing with. I assume that's why you had us here. So
Yeah.
if it's to go through the full meeting and then do questions, that's fine. I just wanted to know what your agenda looked like.
We just had these 3 agenda items were to get a report from you on homelessness and how the city is handling it, and then Arches has come up in these discussions. More than anything, because the Downtown Advisory Board, is, I think we see as one of our primary roles is to make recommendations about the URA budget. So seeing the monies going to Arches, we want to hear what that's doing and what more is needed if needed. And then the last thing was the redevelopment of the UGM site, which I don't know that you would necessarily need to be involved in that discussion. But the first 2 obviously are very related. And the other thing that they're related to, again, is the budget, where the Navigation Center, I think, took most of us a little bit by surprise, because we knew there was the homelessness task force. We knew there was recommendations about a navigation center. We've heard about a navigation center, but then that was all we heard. And then all of a sudden there was this, $4+ million item on our budget that none of us knew anything about. And so there's just a lot of questions about that. And so I feel like I'm talking in circles here, but again, this discussion of the broader discussion about homelessness is, I think, really beneficial to us to inform us. Again, we're not against anything, but I think we need to learn more about it before we're comfortable, and not just us, but all the businesses and people that live downtown that we represent. So,
So Aaron, this is
yeah,
Linda.
please.
I think that really the meeting that we were also very concerned about the $4.1 million of an undisclosed location downtown for a navigation center took us all quite at a big surprise, without having any information about where it was, what it was going to provide. And we felt like a lot of money has already gone towards the homeless. And so we really just felt to be so uninformed that we didn't know what to say about that. And we had presented our comments to the budget committee in hopes of either trying to shed light on what was going on so that we could be informed. And we really didn't get any answers. So I think what Aaron is trying to get to, and probably some of the other board members are wanting to see if any more information on that can be provided and where the end may come. Because does it mean that we need to start looking at a budget that's going to grow and grow because of these centers that may need further support? So that's, I think, what Aaron is trying to ask, and maybe what I want to know.
Well, I think presumably Kristen keeps you, or the staff keeps you informed to the extent that you can be informed on what, which buildings, on those specifics. I mean, those things have been sort of off the record. I think Jimmy put them on the record at one point recently. So I don't know what you do and don't really know today, but I'd leave it up to Kristen to tell you. We have only heard about these in executive session on that particular project. But in terms of support of the programs, I don't think these are capital issues because your money can only be used that way. These are not ongoing programmatic issues. We have other fronts where we're looking for the support funding, particularly looking to the state legislature and others for assistance. And so it's sort of a mixed bag everywhere. This is one where, sort of opportunity arises. You have the opportunity to get the navigation center in place in hopefully the correct place, along with some additional shelter space. And I think it was one of those you kind of jump on it when it's there situations, which is unfortunate. I think that's not the best way always to do business. And I think the best way will be as you have the opportunity to really review and recommend on like the UGM Saffron site and how should that be redeveloped. That's certainly the more common and traditional way that DAB has been sort of in charge of this downtown redevelopment program. So I think that this has been kind of a one-off, and I think unfortunate. Kristen can correct me.
I mean, that's been very much the case, Mayor. We had a very unique circumstance here that's driven by council policy and the council strategic plan for the city, with homelessness being the #1 priority, and a focus on ways to address and meet those needs, and a property acquisition opportunity that has come up that has been discussed in executive session. And when something is in executive session, it's subject to those rules and cannot be shared, and discussed at an advisory board or in another format until it goes public. And when it goes public, then is when the purchase and sell agreement would go before council for consideration and approval. And in this case, the budget process and funding, allocating that funding precedes the purchase and sell agreement, which will be going to the council or wearing the Urban Renewal Board hat this summer. And at that point, then it will be public and open for discussion for one of the properties. The other property where there's a budget allocation set aside, we don't have a purchase and sell agreement prepared for that yet. It's on a little bit of a different timeline, and won't be going public for a while yet. But that is the challenge when typically when we look at property acquisition in an urban renewal agency, it's driven through a discussion of opportunities through the board, as we did a couple of years ago when we bought the UGM site. That was driven through a process where we looked at strategic opportunity sites. We identified several, we moved forward with those discussions that went to council or an agency board, and it flowed that direction. This situation was a bit different because it wasn't driven through the agency, it's driven through the city strategic plan and implementing the city strategic plan and the alignment between the city strategic plan and the urban renewal plan. And cause the information flow to work in a different direction, a different way.
One of the things you just said there, Kristen, I think is really good for us to hear, is that the sale will not be final until there is at least an opportunity for, say, a neighbor to speak up and voice their concerns. And again, not that everyone's going to be against something; they might all decide they're fine with it. But I don't know. I keep thinking of what happened with the idea of using Pringle Hall as a temporary shelter, and the neighborhood kind of shot that down, and it didn't sit well with me that neighborhood gets that opportunity, but say another neighborhood doesn't. That was a big concern. So I think that helps address that for me.
Aaron, if I could just amplify a little bit on the process. if that's all right. So just so you're aware, in executive session, we are not allowed by law to make any final decisions. So we never make actual council decisions in an executive session. We might give staff like direction, say, yeah, we think that's a good idea, something like that. But anything that we hear about in executive session ultimately goes in before a public meeting, before we can actually make a decision. So that's where that public process comes in. So we can't purchase property without the opportunity for the public to have input. We can't. It's unlawful, and we wouldn't do it. And so the city of Salem or the Urban Renewal Agency will never purchase property that you don't have a chance to weigh in on, or the neighbors don't have a chance to weigh in on, no matter where it is in the city, no matter what the circumstance, no matter how far in advance we knew about it potentially. You're always going to have an opportunity to weigh in. And you gave a great example, that Pringle Hall thing. We all thought it was a great idea. This is going to solve our problem for right now. You know, the neighbors came out and they shared with us different perspectives. We listened to it and we decided to go a different direction. And that could happen in this case. We don't know, because we have not made any decision.
And then Aaron, the one other piece of that is tied to the budget piece is, you know, in that process that Councillor Hoy's talking about, how there will be an executive session discussion. Staff will then move forward and have the conversations, start the development of a purchase and sale agreement. It comes back to council to then either accept that, to allow the opportunity for the public to comment before council about an acquisition. But we as staff cannot enter into a purchase and sale agreement if we don't have a budgetary appropriation for that. So sometimes that sort of blanket budgetary appropriation, then that has to occur before we can enter into negotiations or start any contracting kind of process.
Got it. Thank you. Kara, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks, Councillor Hoy, Kristen. It's really helpful, I think, for the advisory board to hear. I do too want to just, I guess, acknowledge the difficulty it is as an advisory board to be presented with a $4.5 million budget item that you don't really know what it's about. So, I mean, it's kind of just an awkward situation in that respect. So I definitely want to acknowledge that. Aaron was kind enough to share with me a letter that he wrote back in March. And I'm just curious, perhaps the city could answer some of these questions for DAB that DAB has brought up without revealing information that we can't make public right now, because some of these questions seem like some of them we've answered actually, I think right now, asking how it aligns strategically with the plan. But there's some other things here, like, does the property have value in the market as a higher use? I think we could probably answer those things without giving a location or real specifics about the building. So I guess, I mean, it's not my place in this meeting, but I would hope we'd be able to go through these and at least provide some reassurances. I mean, knowing that you're going to get full opportunity in the future to know all the specifics, but for right now, addressing some of these things could be really helpful and maybe just provide some reassurances to this board as well.
So I think, Aaron, is this the letter that the city manager responded to?
Yeah, yes, partially. I didn't get a lot of answers to these questions just about the navigation center, I guess.
Yeah, I think some of the questions, to get into any detailed explanation, I think would reveal a location.
I do think there are some though that wouldn't. I mean, that we could probably just take I don't know what the right word is, say, like, personally, like that number one, I would say it probably doesn't have value as a higher use right now, you know? So we could, I'm just wondering if we could go through those and maybe take a look at what we could give for the board, because I want all of you to be supportive of this, even if you don't know right now where it's at and all the specifics, but knowing that this is part of our strategic planning and it's an opportunity purchase essentially. So whatever, I feel like whatever we can do to help gate your support, because you're out in the community and talking with others, and that's what we want you to be doing too. So I'm just wondering if there's more that we could provide without getting into the confidentiality of it. Yeah.
One of the,
Go back and look at that prior response and see if there's any additional clarification that we can add that doesn't get into the confidentiality.
that'd be great. Right? We want to respect the laws. And I appreciate it, Kara. I can also say that if Kristen and others were able to review those questions and to respond in a written format, it's fine. We don't, I think, for example, we've already gotten a few answers here that are, I think I've seen a lot of thumbs up from people. So I'm appreciating the discussion, and I appreciate the push. And Councilor Hoy, did you have something?
I actually kind of have a question for Kristen as she's thinking about answering those questions. Can we tell them where it's not? Like if they had a specific property, like if they wondered, is it this property? Can we say, no, it's not that property? I don't know.
Yeah, we could. If they wanted to ask if, is it JCPenney's? No, it's not JCPenney's. Yes,
And
we
it's
can.
not Rite Aid.
Yeah, it's not Rite Aid.
Yeah.
We can answer those sorts of questions.
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool. Okay. Thanks. So if you ask about every property in downtown, eventually you'll get there.
When you
Not my
quickly
intent. but
on
you know what I
answer,
mean.
that gives you your answer.
I had one quick question in interest of not wasting anyone's time if some folks needed to jump off. But while everyone was here, one of the things that came up in our discussions at DAB was the fact that, again, I mentioned it earlier, housing is a big thing that we want downtown. And this idea came up that if, well, we're going to spend $4 million, let's say, on this navigation center, why not spend $8 million and have a bunch of units as part of it? Could one of the Kara or Councilor Hoy or Mayor Bennett, could one of you kind of tell us if that, just right off the top of your head, that's a bad idea and why? Or
Great idea.
I can tell you my opinion. My opinion, I mean, it'd be a great idea. We want more units downtown as well.
Ah,
The problem with doing that though is we'd still have a huge homeless problem, and that we wouldn't be any closer to solving it. And that's a big problem for everybody, for all those potential new units. People, it's not as desirable to live down there if you have homeless people everywhere who are unhoused. And so that just, is it a bad idea? No, it's a great idea. If we had more money, I would love to spend that money for exactly that. But we have to, I feel like, and I believe the council feels like, working towards a resolution of the homeless problem is our #1 priority. And so that's where we want to put our resources right now. Now, next time we have money available or something, would that mean could we put it towards exactly what you're saying, Aaron? Yeah, maybe. But we really have to take this substantial step, and getting a navigation center is a huge step towards helping resolve our homelessness problem. So that's my opinion.
And Aaron, if I could add to that just a little bit, and this may be a good thing for Jimmy to speak about in a moment, is kind of, if we go back in time a little bit to when some of these discussions came up about the navigation center, that was also driven by a report that came out of the governor's office identifying the need for a navigation center specifically in Salem, and what looked like a very real likelihood that there would be some funding from the state for a navigation center as we were going through this last legislative session. And then things, completely went a different direction with the legislative session and then with COVID. But at that point in time, it was extremely time sensitive.
And to be clear, Kristen is talking about the walkout. We were literally on the verge of getting the funding, and then there was the walkout. So just so you're really clear,
yeah, I remember that.
Caused the situation, and then then COVID, and then the economy tanked, and now here we are.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot, everybody. Go ahead, Linda.
I was just going to say that's really important to hear, that sort of the history and also the process that the city is under that I didn't fully appreciate or really understand. I I think that I felt that we were being asked to approve a budget. And it sounds like that budget was not really approved, but still in a guided process. So I thank you for clarifying that. And we look forward to hearing more about decisions that get made.
Well, Erin, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm going to move on to my next meeting, but I really appreciate it. I hope from my perspective, if there's anything you specifically want to ask me, I'd be glad to answer it. Otherwise, I'm going to leave the meeting. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Okay, did anybody else have any questions for Councilor Hoy or Councilor Kaiser or Kristen or others about what we talked about thus far? Okay. Next is arches. So Jimmy Jones is here. He's the director of the Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action Agency, which runs arches downtown. And we know we've, through the URA, put money into that project. And we know there's another line item in the budget for the upcoming year to possibly purchase that property. So we're really excited to have you here just to tell us, one, what has the money that has already gone into the building helped you be able to provide? Maybe even before that, some of the needs that you address just in general. And then two, what the future looks like and where you see things going.
Well, thank you, Aaron. It's very great to be here today and have an opportunity to talk a little bit about the agency and our work. I would just like to kind of begin by doubling down on some of the comments that Councilor Hoy and the mayor made about where we are and the challenges we face with this particular issue here in Salem. The first thing you have to realize off the top is that we are 20 years behind really where we ought to be. We have an enormous homeless problem in the city and in the region, the community. We count a huge number of people every year. Not all of them stay homeless, but many of them do for quite some time. People often ask me how many homeless individuals there are in Salem. It really depends on what you mean when you say that. At any one time, we're tracking about 1,800 people who are literally homeless. That doesn't include people who are couched or anything of that nature. Around 400 of them are in shelter of some sort. Then we have another 400 or so that are in cars, but of the 1,000 that remain, they are spread out around the urban growth boundary of Salem-Keizer, and many of them have been there for 5, 10, or even 15 years or longer. So it's a very deep-seated, long-term issue, and it's going to take smart public policy and very wise choices for the next 2 decades really to make an enormous difference in this. So this is not going to be a quick fix at all. But on the other hand, it's also not unwinnable. This is something I think it's a generational problem. I think, when we think back, I'm 52 years old, and homelessness in 1980, when I was 12 years old, was not that big of an issue outside of some very large urban centers. I think, 20 years from now, we can get to the point where this is kind of 2010 and 2020's problem and not really a problem for 20 years from now. The agency as a whole goes back to 1967. It has grown dramatically over the last few years in particular. Our primary mission is to administer anti-poverty programs. So we have 8 program areas. Arches is one of those 8 program areas. The agency as a whole, before COVID started, was at around $35 million a year. Arches delivers about $7 million worth of services and resources a year. We've brought in probably an additional 10 million since COVID started, state and federal sources to help to deal with some of the things that are in front of us. But Arches really has 4 primary missions, 4 primary roles. The first one is that we run a very large data project on homelessness in the community called our Coordinated Entry Project. And that's designed to give us the most information we possibly can about our homeless community so that we can design programs and systems that make the most sense and are the most efficient and the most productive. So for every homeless individual that I've mentioned, we get 100 data points on each one. And I can tell you enormously detailed data about how long they've been homeless, why they're homeless, what their barriers are, what their income levels are, what their health status are, so that we can put together housing programs that are effective. And that was one of the big issues that the community struggled with for a very long time, is that not only were we not targeting this large group of individuals who were outside, but the way in which we were doing it was not very effective at all. So that data project is one element of Arches. The second element is housing programs itself. In a normal month prior to COVID, we house about 150 households a month. Now, some of that's long-term, some of it's short-term. Since COVID started, we're up to about 200 households a month. And with these new resources that are coming in, that's going to expand dramatically quickly. And those resources are state, federal, and local. We probably have, as a community action agency, the closest and tightest partnership with the housing authority of anyone in the state. And a lot of our programs are integrated. We have a big role in the HRAP program that you may have heard about. We have a big role in that Fisher Roads project, Redwoods Crossing, that you've heard about. And in a lot of stuff, we're coordinating very closely with the city, including the warming centers, the point in time count, and many other projects. The third major goal of Arches is to provide basic needs. Essentially, this other side of the coin in homeless services, where housing is the most effective solution. But since we don't have enough housing, we don't have enough resources to house everybody, we try to provide human dignity to the people who are outside until we get a chance to house them. So what that means is a lot of outreach into the camps. It means providing food. It means providing tents at times. It means running sheltering projects. It means providing laundry and showers and hot meals, which are recently available through the urban renewal investment in the Arches project at 615 Commercial. And just as an aside, I would be happy to arrange a tour of that at some point in time so you can really see what your money bought. And it's really amazing when you walk through there and can see just how much more we can bring to the game because that project is completed. So we also have mobile outreach in terms of those basic needs. We have run a shower truck. We take that shower truck all over the community and all over both counties so that folks can have the access to get a clean shower there. And the last mission, the fourth part of that mission, is that we provide resource connections. Now, a lot of these resource connections are really designed for that part of the homeless population that don't stay homeless very long. Those are the ones who are couched or, who just recently became homeless but are capable of employment. For those individuals, homelessness is more of a social problem. At the other end of the scale, this chronic population, the ones that were camped downtown, the ones that are in Wallace Marine today, the ones that are out there in Cascade Gateway, that area, that homelessness is really more of a medical problem. And so we have to use, research-based, a more medical approach to begin to solve that. So, but we provide a lot of resources. We provide access to work programs, job training, rental education programs, and all kinds of stuff there that help people to achieve status of self-sufficiency. So those are our big four areas. But for me, I'm not interested in maintaining the status quo. My only interest in this game is to end homelessness permanently for everybody that's out there. Now, there's always going to be a few. There are always going to be a few individuals who don't want assistance, or it takes a long time to convince them that they need assistance. But that really isn't an excuse not to be trying to figure out the other 95% of the problem. And I think that we are on the verge for the first time. You got to realize that until 3 years ago, Salem had 22 beds for permanent supportive housing projects, just 22. Eugene has 750. And through HRAP, we've housed 300 individuals who have been outside for an awful long time. Average length of homelessness for them was 8 years. This Fisher Road project is going to provide 38 beds, just 38 people who are really too high needs even for HRAP, that we've struggled in terms of scattered site private rental market placements. And then again, much depends on budgets and whether or not, the state recovers quickly, but we're in a pretty good position to even go after another larger facility, maybe somewhere in North Salem in 2 or 3 years that might even take a much bigger dent out of that homeless population than Redwoods. So Quinna's coming online. There's a lot of stuff that is just maturing that we've invested in the last few years that's going to have an enormous impact. And the last thing I would kind of like to just touch on, because I know it's on everybody's mind, is really, what is a navigation center? What is it really designed to do? So a navigation center is pretty small. It's not big like UGM. It's not really meant to shelter or to house a large number of people. The idea is you're really focused on about 35 or 40 folks at a time, maybe even a little bit less. You're bringing them into a shelter environment, and your primary purpose is to get them out of there within 90 days. They're not there for a long time. And when you put them in there, you have a place to send them when you're ready to exit them. They will already be tied to a permanent supportive housing bed, an apartment, a door at Redwoods or something of that nature. It is a short-term, temporary, transitionary placement so that we can get those folks stabilized enough that we can put them in a housing placement and know with a high degree of fidelity that it's going to be successful. So it is another system design piece that's going to make what we already have so much more efficient and so much more effective. Now, I can't, as you well know, talk too much about the details of where that might be or what it might look like, but I do feel at the end of the day that it's not going to be anything that's going to increase the homeless presence in the downtown area significantly at all. In fact, I think it's going to be one of our best pathways to begin to draw down the number of people in the downtown. I just like all of you, I am troubled by what I see as the inhumanity of having to live in those conditions. And we want to do everything that we can to not only increase more resources, but also to make sure that the ones we have are smartly designed and working well. So I'd be happy to take any questions.
Mr. Jones, you said that, sorry,
I'll take your time.
Yeah, I'm having trouble finding words recently.
It's okay.
To the rest of the group. You said keeping or having this downtown isn't going to be bringing more homeless. It will decrease that. I was just asking for statistical information, or like rather than or in addition to your statement.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like of Eugene, places like Eugene and in Portland, as they have they seen decrease of that,
So what you see commonly in the downtown is people who are already being drawn in for services. Most of them, prior to the emergency order, a lot of them, 50 or 60 toward the end of it, were already camping in the downtown streets over there next to Rite Aid, next to what the Nordstrom building was. And now, now that we have this emergency order in place, most of those individuals are just right across the river in Wallace Marine. So they're coming into town every day anyway, right? They're coming in to go to the 7-Eleven, they're coming in to go to the Rite Aid, they're coming in to go to Arches and other places. So the addition of the navigation center will only be to address those individuals that are really already there and not bring other homeless in from the outside.
Right. Thank you.
And since we'll have that navigation center, we'll actually be exiting, through various cohorts, individuals in that nav center to permanent housing placements.
Go ahead, Councilor Hoy.
Thank you. And also, I just wanted to kind of add to what Jimmy was saying, just as a reminder, for those who don't get out to my part of town very often, we have a very large number of homeless people out in East Salem. I mean, the folks that are congregating downtown are much more visible because there's not the green spaces and other places for them to sort of sink into. But out here, the neighborhoods, the Lancaster Market, there are a very large number of homeless individuals out here. So I just sometimes people aren't aware of that, or we forget about talking about that, but it's a daily fact out here. I mean, I'm like 1 block inside the city. I live right near Cordon Road, and I have had a homeless individual sleeping on my front porch. Okay, so just so you know, this is a city, and not just a citywide issue, but it's an area-wide issue that really takes a lot of we got to come out from a lot of different angles. Also, one other thing, Councilor Kaiser asked me to send her regrets. She had to leave for a work meeting, so that's why she had to step out.
Right. Just to follow up on Councilor Hoy's comments, East Salem, I think, is the one area that the entire community, service community, and everybody is not doing a good job in as we really need to be. The growth of the homeless population out there the last 3 years has just been enormous. And, you know, you don't see it as much sometimes because there are places for folks to hide and to blend into that you won't find on those downtown city streets as easily. But, you know, this is a citywide problem. It's an issue in Kaiser. It's an issue in South Salem. It's definitely an issue in West Salem at the moment. And, you know, we want to essentially end homelessness, and it's going to, you know, we can't just target any one part of town to do that. We have to do this in a very scientific way. But I don't think any of us have any intention of trying to force more homeless individuals into the downtown.
That's a really, I think, important point that we've actually discussed quite a bit. And I think both you, Jimmy, and Councilor Hoare are saying the same thing, that we were kind of feeling a sense of almost inequity in terms of, well, just because the downtown URA has money, we're just going to end up putting more and more facilities downtown, when this is really an issue that is regional. And you know, I've met homeless people downtown that are from Staten, or, you know, and so that was a big concern of ours, was that, and I think all of us share you know, an empathetic heart and wanting to help people for sure. And I think you heard that in our idea of providing housing. Like, if we can do that, we want to. On the other hand, we were hoping to see maybe a broader strategy citywide in terms of using URA dollars, you know, and other URAs, and not just North Salem and downtown. So if maybe you two could speak to that. And
I do think, Aaron, I do think you see the city actually following exactly what your hope is there. I mean, you have the Fisher Road project going up out there, essentially in East Salem on the other side of I-5. The next big target that we have in my mind is a property on Broadway, way up north, almost to Kaiser itself. You know, we have Quinna Hall. You know, certainly the city has put an enormous amount of investment into arches, and we're very appreciative of that, and we think it's been very effective. But I do think if you watch, and the property that's also going up on the state hospital grounds, the collaboration with Mountain West, it does appear to me that their strategy has been to spread this around the city. And I know when you see budget items that just pop up without explanation, it can sometimes say, oh my gosh, what's happening? But I do think, in fairness to them, that they have spread that around.
And that's one of the things about having a city council that is elected by ward. You know, we all, even though we're city councilors for the entire city, we represent particular wards. And so this is a conversation that we have all the time about, you know, sometimes Councilor Osick in Ward 5, which is mainly North Salem, feels like, you know, they get a lot of the, you know, low income or affordable housing, that sort of thing out in that area. Other folks feel neglected, you know, different things. So we're constantly trying to reach a balance of service delivery and availability, and for all the reasons you're talking about. Now, one of the things that does make sometimes areas like downtown a little bit more enticing is the URA. You know, we don't have anything like that out here in East Salem, although now we do have that single property option available that we did just approve there on Center Street. And so I think that's going to open up a lot more opportunity in the future for areas that aren't in downtown, especially to provide those services. I know one of my neighborhood associations in my ward is on, like, it's a high priority for them to get services out here for homeless people. And so far, you know, we're not necessarily a service provider in that way. We engage with nonprofits and other folks to provide that. And so far that hasn't happened, but it doesn't mean that we're not trying. We certainly are. The folks out here, I think, basically end up being homeless with no services for the most part. as opposed to the folks downtown or closer to downtown who have services available. So,
you know, it's funny, we do outreach over there in East Salem, and I almost invariably, every time I go do it myself personally with one of our teams, we find people we never knew about. They're not on our records, they're not in our rolls, they're not in our system. And, you know, the convenient way is, well, they came in here from somebody else, but usually it's not true. So we still got a lot of work to do on the east side of town.
Yep. And so I just want you guys all to know that that's a conversation that is ongoing, frequent. Nobody is interested in having downtown have an outsized proportion of services or homeless people by any means. In fact, just the opposite.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, then Chinzo, for the question. Other questions for Mr. Jones?
Don't have a question. This is Linda, but I wanted to thank him for explaining the navigation center. I did not realize, I thought it was a day center, and I thought that there wasn't any sheltering there. So I appreciated that a lot, and that helps understand a bit better what that resource would be.
You can kind of think of it as like a triage and referral center on steroids.
Yeah.
Because with the ability to actually house people for a little while, to get them stable, like Jimmy said, while they're getting referred into long-term services. It's a really great opportunity, because sometimes folks just need that little bit of really good structure to sort of get stabilized, and then until they're off to their more permanent solution.
Again, thank you both. I thought it was just a day center, and so this is much more, as you say, on steroids to help. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Tyson.
Yes. Jimmy, what do you think is the minimum number of units in the navigation center for it to be maximally productive based off your experience?
Yeah, Tyler, that's an excellent question. And a lot of that gets back to what the operational budget of that navigation center end up looking like. And of course, that question really goes back to the state as to how quickly they're willing to fund it. So I think all of us believe that the state would not be able to fund it and would drop it fairly quickly. But even in this short session that's been convened, the conversation is still there. Everybody is still sort of focused on finding ways to do it. But to not duck your question, I think that ideally it needs to be a minimum of 30. But once you hit 50, then you're really running into, something that's ineffective. So I usually say at 30 to 40, 35 is sort of primary perfect. Part of it is, we're going to have to be very deliberate about the units that people are attached to. Somebody may come into a navigation center, and then after you've had them in there for a couple of weeks, you think, you know what, they can probably survive or do well and thrive in a market-based scattered site apartment. We just need to find them a landlord. And then you'll have somebody else who come in and they say, no, they need on-site case management 24/7. And that's another primary benefit of a facility like that, is that it gives you a longer period of time, not only to do triage, but assessment and diagnosis to kind of figure out what the best possible placement is, so that we don't waste a lot of resources and a lot of time on bad placements.
Thank you.
Are you familiar with the Resource Access Center in Portland, the Bud Clark Commons?
Yes.
Does this have some of the similar components, or
it is
a little
somewhat
different?
Yes, that is a navigation center. It is somewhat similar to the one that we're proposing here. I tend to think ours will be smaller and a little bit more targeted. I mean, Bud Clark is enormous, and the administration that goes on around it is large. But what you would have here is essentially a collaboration between my agency and the Housing Authority, and we work very closely every day on probably a dozen different projects to kind of find out and figure out who is best served by going where. And that level of coordination we never had before. And I do think that when you actually see what it is, it's going to be something that you're going to think is not only cost effective, but it is something that helps us to draw down and to house more of the homeless folks that are in Salem.
Great, thanks. Other questions? Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Jones and Counselor Hoy again for that information. I think it's been really helpful for all of us.
I've appreciated the conversation too, and I'm happy to come back anytime.
Great. Thank you. And thank you for all your work, both of you.
Yes, thank you.
I think we all agree it's needed and hard work.
It is very hard work. I'm going to tell you that. It's, you know, there are days you wake up and you think, I don't know, you know, how we're going to pull this one off, but usually most of the time it works out. But it's important for us to have the support of all of the community behind these projects, because this is an issue that affects us all. It doesn't matter what part of town we live in. It doesn't matter what our political persuasions are. It doesn't matter if we're a small business owner or just a retired renter somewhere in South Salem. All of us are having to deal with this. I think that to the extent that we can explain what we're doing and build support for it and to get everybody behind these projects, I think it will help us all.
Great. Thank you. So the last thing was on our agenda was discussion around the scope of work for what will be the former UGM and Saffron property. Do we have Kristen or Cherie, do we have something to set this discussion up, or did you have specific questions for us? Or actually, now that I think about it, I think you sent something, a memo, right?
Do you want me to go through the memo?
Yeah, there's the memo. Dana's got it. I'm just switching between screens here. Dana's got real life paper. Yeah, sure. That'd be great, Cherie.
Okay, I'll do that. So one of the things that we've talked about during, well, we've been talking about it for quite a while, but that we talked about during the budget session was putting some money in the budget so that we could start looking at some potential opportunity design concepts or just ideas for the UGM Saffron site. And so what I thought I would do to start the conversation was go back to what came out of your public meeting when we had, we blew up kind of the existing buildings and had them there at a table and asked people to share what their vision was or what they would like to see there. So basically this just reminds you as the items that came out: rooftop dining, multiple people referenced housing, hotel, retail, grocery, multiple people, brew pub, yoga, which would just be it wouldn't be the whole, we wouldn't do a block of yoga. And then just a mix of uses. So in order to have enough time to be thoughtful about what we might want to go out and solicit for development opportunities, I thought we should start now. And Aaron and I had a little bit of a conversation. And for me, what I think would be helpful would be to have a subcommittee be created to work through some ideas of which we could then bring back to the board to discuss, with the goal of taking something to the agency board that kind of outlined the types of projects that we would be looking at for those sites. And I think it's interesting because, you know, obviously we're in a different moment now than we would have been 9 months ago. I mean, right now, office type of space, because of COVID and the changes of how people are working remotely, might not be the one that we would look at for a piece of the mix of use, where we might have looked at that differently before, because things have changed so quickly. And that will be part of the fun or the exploration or the adventure that we go on when we start looking at what we might like to see there. Does anybody have any questions, Aaron, for me?
Well, Cherie, I'm only familiar with what you did on North Broadway with the Broadway Commons, Broadway Town Square, those three properties there. Are we looking at a similar process? Maybe if not, don't waste any time on that. If yes, maybe explain a little bit about that history for the benefit of everybody.
Yes, it's different. It was different there than on Portland Road. So all of the outreach on that was done before I started work here. But there was a plan that the neighborhood put together that laid out what they would like to see happen up on Broadway. Some of you that live there or have been here, there was like the Eagles Lodge or some type of a lodge, and it had a historic sense to it. And so those of you that know Mr. Skillern, he really wanted to, anyway. So the city went in and I think purchased, Renee may know exactly, at least 11 properties. They assembled quite a bit of land with the goal of then taking what came out of all of the neighborhood associations and the outreaches, desires for what they would like there. And that's what they put into an RFP or a request for proposal. The big one was a grocery store. That was like the #1 item that community wanted. They wanted like a Fred Meyer's, one-stop shopping, and they wanted housing. But what happened was the individual that won the solicitation, they were big developers, Gertie Edlin out of Portland, the market changed. And with that, they were not able then to get a grocery store to have any interest in locating on Broadway, which was very disappointing for the community. So we turned around and outreached more locally and had then multiple developers instead of one do all of the sites that we had. So Salem Alliance Church was selected to do where Broadway Commons is. And then David Glennie had 2 different development arms. One did a low-income housing tax credit project. They partnered with the YWCA. They were leaving their location on State Street. I think Willamette University bought the building they were in with the pool. So the YW was able to relocate the women. And these were people at 30% or less median family income. They were allowed, because of the tax credits, to live there, and the Y had their programs there. And then of course the Y went out of business, and Family Building Blocks went in there. I can't think of who's in there now. So that was on the north side, the west side, and then David Glennie did market rate housing where the cinema is. So, and then he did those townhomes behind it. So there was a mix of uses that were put in there. And then out on Portland Road, similar type of thing. We assembled sites, bought it, and then went out to ask for what we wanted there, a mix of uses too. And that's where the 50+ center was part. Obviously that's ours, but then there's a mix of uses next to it. So we would do something similar. We would take a look at what we would like to put there, a mix of uses, what would have the most impact and benefits to the community. We would put the scope together, and then we would put that out, and hopefully development partners would come in and want to move that forward for us. That's the goal.
So you're asking us to help craft what we would like to see happen with the site, and then we put that, and for those who don't know, we put out a request for proposals to developers who would then eventually own the property. They would buy it. And so we would include some kind of incentives for them to make it enticing for them to participate, I assume. And then it's not just hope for the best, it's they enter into an agreement that they say they'll fulfill these, whatever this checklist is of things that we want in exchange for the deal, the property, I presume.
So up on Broadway, there wasn't incentives built into how we did our solicitation. We had done environmental, obviously we assembled all the sites. We vacated land, we did environmental remediation, and then we sold the site to a developer. Once he knew what he was doing, he came in under the federal programs for the low-income housing project and received a low interest rate loan through federal programs and some URA money to help out with that project. but it wasn't what we did in the beginning. It wasn't what we offered as part of the original transaction. Once they had a proposal and they looked at what they were going to be doing, they then came in to access programs separately from that. I think they're all just a little bit different. When we look at this one, again, we have other programs that, depending on what they wanted to build, they would be open and available to access those also as a downtown property owner. Does that help?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
And if you're asking to put together a task force, I'll say selfishly, but I imagine there might be others here. If I were to, because I'd love to be involved, but I imagine I'll probably be also working with a developer or two who actually go after the project. At least I hope that happens. But if I or others were to volunteer to be on the subcommittee that helps put this together, is that a conflict of interest? Or I guess I'm both disclosing that now, but also asking the question. Like I presume if this does go out to an RFP to developers, that I'm going to actually be sending the RFP to developers that I work with and saying, hey, do you want to put together a proposal for this? So
I can answer that. Again, coming up with the scope that would be in an RFP, there wouldn't be a conflict unless you're making it so specific in some way to somebody that you're working with.
Right.
The process to select who would be the one we would move forward with is a completely sanitized, sterile process. You would not be on the board that reviewed those proposals. Somebody else from the advisory board who has no affiliation with anybody would be on the board. So you would be removed. Just coming up with different types of criteria to bring back to the full board to help develop this. Obviously, your expertise would be very helpful, I think, in putting that together. But we won't let you have a conflict, Aaron.
okay, yeah, I guess I'd love to be involved.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
and I guess for the benefit of the group, if some are feeling like they'd like to be involved but they don't want to commit to being on a subcommittee, I presume we will bring back to the group for broader discussion any kind of recommendation or ideas, right?
Absolutely. We'll want their feedback as we move forward with it.
Okay. So is now the time to just kind of start throwing out some ideas, or are we trying to just get a subcommittee and then we're going to wrap up our meeting here because we got 5 minutes?
Let's just get the subcommittee because I wanted to touch base on my vacancy memo real quick too.
Okay. So how many people do you want, Sheree? I see Vincenzo.
Okay. Oh no, not the three of us again.
Kristen's on the committee. She raised her hand.
Who?
Kristen and Linda.
Kristen.
Kristen's laughing. I think she wanted to say something. Tyson also raised his hand.
I want to speak before the meeting's over.
That would be a perfect amount. Aaron, Vincenzo, Linda, and Kristen and me are one and the same. Thank you so much.
My hand is not raised, Sheree, to be on the committee, just to make sure that I can say something before we finish the meeting.
Yes, yes. Well, I'm going to ask you to say something real quick here because when I was talking to Scott McLeod on the phone, he wanted me to be sure to speak on his behalf in regards to the street closures.
Perfect.
So basically, and I hope, I don't know if that's what you were going to talk about, but that's what I want you to talk about. And this is a great segue to it. So basically, both sides of his mouth. Thank you, city, congrats for wanting to do something. However, it was completely wrong, cheating people out of things and inequitable. And I told him that I would pass it on, but that we had already received that feedback and that, you know, we are looking at moving forward with a different approach to this, where if it was a full closure, both sides of the street, businesses would have an opportunity to take advantage of not having people park in front of their business. But if you could share, because you've been key and all this, that would be great.
So, yes. So this came out of the first council meeting in June, where a motion was introduced that night by Councilor Kaiser to initiate closures downtown to allow businesses to expand into the streets. We asked to be able to kind of implement this as a pilot project because there are a great number of details to work through, from the operations side of it, the number of barriers and barricades that would be needed, traffic flow, parking, outreach to businesses. We have had the suspension of parking enforcement because of the crisis through July 1st. So with all of these different things, we asked to have some flexibility to first roll this out as a pilot project to give us more time to get some input from the community and feedback, and then develop how to best roll it out more broadly. So we implemented this very rapidly in response to that motion, and started it last Saturday morning with a half street closure on the south side of State Street between Commercial and Liberty. That location was selected for a few different reasons, largely driven by the fact that the bank is closed right now, and because of the traffic flow, and the ability to close things down and still have traffic not significantly impacting the traffic flow with that configuration. So we have been receiving feedback. We've had a few meetings with the business community, Zoom calls here over the last week. As we move forward, we are going to be doing this as weekend closures. And we will be starting the 3rd of July. So we will start getting information out, and Main Street, the Chamber, and Travel Salem will also be getting the word out for kicking off the Summer Street starting July 3rd. And right now we are looking at full block closures in most areas. So it would be the full block on Court Street from Front to Commercial. From Commercial to Liberty, we will need to keep one travel lane open because SIDS receives deliveries during the weekend. And then we had proposed closing the full block from Commercial to High Street on Court Street, but we are following our meeting today, still working that through. That might be a half block closure just from the alley to High. Then on State Street, the closure will be from Commercial to Liberty, and then another closure from Liberty to High Street, and then on High Street from State Street to Ferry. Alleys will remain open, and there will have to have clearance down the center of each road to allow for emergency vehicle access. So implementation starting the 3rd of July for the holiday weekend. And then the plan is that this would continue through September with ongoing weekend closures, pending feedback, or unless there are some significant issues with continuing the closures. If they do more harm than good. The hope is that these will do good for the community and bring people downtown.
So you said like you made accommodations for like SIDS. Is it the same on each block that you're just going business by business and seeing if they're...
We're trying to keep it consistent. They're the only big business that we know that receives regular weekend deliveries and has big trucks that need to offload. So we have not heard from others that have similar big truck kind of deliveries. They're a little bit unique.
But you're giving each business a chance to speak up and say, you can't do this to us.
We're doing some walkarounds next Tuesday. Part of that was the purpose of the pilot project as well, to start hearing back from the business community. But we cannot accommodate this business by business and property by property downtown. It'll be very difficult to set up this way in front of SIDS. It'll be challenging again to have these sorts of setups on Court Street if we just do from the alley to High. But from Public Works, this is going to be about 4 hours to set up each weekend and 4 hours to take down We're trying to get business volunteers to assist with it, but with the traffic control plans, with the coordination with OLCC, it cannot be highly customizable. So I think the direction from council is to make it as broad through the downtown as we can.
Okay.
Yeah, but
Cherie,
we be working on the outreach. So we've got a
Yeah.
scheduled next week where folks from the Chamber, Main Street, Travel Salem, and Cherie and I are going to be just doing walkarounds, talking with businesses next week.
Great. Cherie, did Scott have a specific thing that he didn't think was equitable?
Well, remember, and again, we had already heard from the businesses on the north side of State Street. You know, the gray building, his building is on the north side. And so that is the side that we left open, and the south side was closed. So if I'm Wild Pear or if I'm Taproots, I have additional seating. I have a different look and feel. If I'm Wallace's, if I'm Dolce Mama's, if I'm the sweet shop, I got, obviously my parking was even in more demand than usual. Where, as Kristen said, if it's a full closure, both sides of the street are impacted equally. You take advantage of it or you don't. And the week was not necessarily what people were thinking. They thought it was just the weekends. So, I mean, Kristen's right. When you only have 5 days to try to get something, I mean, because that's the challenge for us. If you want to outreach appropriately, we wouldn't get done with it until September, and then you lose the moment. And so this way we're trying to grab the moment the best we can to help the businesses. So Charles, good news for you. You just heard it. Is he there?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
You want to mention the park as well?
The what?
The dining platforms. That we're
really? You want me to talk about the platforms?
I would just mention that we're continuing.
Okay. Well, we had originally started out thinking that we wanted to do like what the Dalles has and what Selwood has. They're parklets, but they're really platforms where basically if I'm a restaurant, I can have a platform that is at the same height as the sidewalk. And, you know, it then has a barrier for the vehicles because it's a platform, and that's where I would have my expanded seating. So it would be removal of a parking space versus the closure of a street. And so Portland has a program. It requires a lot of design and review by different departments because of safety and wanting them to be safe for transportation and for those using it. So it's something that maybe will be the next chapter for us to consider as we move forward with looking at this pilot program. They're different because obviously it's just parking spaces in front of a business, not necessarily a street closure. We were hoping that we could get that all together, but again, just the amount of time for somebody to have to give us a design, build it, get it set up, summer's over. So this street closure on the weekends, we're hoping will create an environment more like an event for these businesses and be fun and have people come down and enjoy it.
Cool. And Aaron, if
So
could I just follow up briefly from council's perspective?
Please.
So Councilor Kaiser and I are the ones that kind of masterminded this at the behest of downtown businesses, a couple of them. And so our goal was, and we knew we were creating headaches for staff. We knew that, and we knew that, you know, there were going to be logistical issues, but we really just wanted to do something really fast that could really help our downtown businesses, because, you know, when you're trying to open a restaurant with all these social distancing requirements, most of our downtown restaurants are pretty small, you know, and so can they really even make money by opening, or are people going to feel comfortable being down there? You know, and so we thought, gosh, how can we just help? How can we give them some more space and make it kind of an atmosphere where people are going to want to come down there and eat at our great restaurants. And so we knew that it was going to be like, not everything was going to be perfect and not everybody was going to be happy, but we really thought that we just wanted to go big and bold to try to get something, to try to help folks out, and also help out the residents we've all been stuck in our houses for how long now. So anyway, that was our goal. And staff has done a great job trying to implement something that we knew was going to be really difficult. And we were kind of not very accommodating to all of their logical reasons for wanting to slow us down, which were all very well thought and appropriate, but we were saying no. So.
And there is a huge amount of community interest in having the full street closures, and I think that the 4th of July weekend will be a great weekend to roll it out. And I think that by doing then, we will also avoid a lot of the conflict that we would have sooner with parking, with a lot of residents still parking on the street. So I think, it also gives us time we've got a lot of equipment that we need to lease, barricades. We're gonna have a lot of barricades down there. The one other piece that starting this over the 4th will help with is, there's still a lot of demonstrations that are going on, and there's another demonstration with the streets closure scheduled this coming Saturday. So one more weekend will get us through the last of the scheduled street closures for demonstrations, so that we won't have the conflict between diners and people trying to walk through their tables.
Cool. Well, thanks for your work on that, Kristen, Cherie, and Councillor Hoy. I think it's mostly widely accepted, and people are pretty excited about it. So it almost sounds like Scott's problem was that he wanted it on his side too. so it's, yeah, okay.
Well, I think
Cool.
just to make sure that everybody has the right information, we're not doing it in all areas. Obviously, we're not doing it on Liberty. We can't do it on Marion. We can't do it on Center. We can't do it on Ferry. But what we can do for somebody like Noble Wave or Archive or Bow and Vine, they can expand with permission from their adjacent neighbors beyond the front of their business. So, if you have, some kind of commercial or some type of other kind, not a food or beverage type of place, you can ask them, hey, can I put my tables further down the sidewalk? And there's a lot of willingness to support that too.
Okay, so we're a little over our meeting time, so I understand if people need to jump off. But did we have any other comments, questions, people?
I just wanted to say, Aaron, my vacancy memo that I stuck in your packet, I just want to make sure that we don't lose sight of that challenge for us also. Penny's is 100,000 square feet of a building. And that is a building in addition to what we already had. Nordstrom's, TJ Maxx, White Seed Building. All of those that I listed have a significant amount of vacancy in them. And it's going to be another piece of our conversation as to what role can we play to try to help those buildings, especially when now I think there's going to be a change. Let's say Nordstrom's, the property owner, was going to do event space. I'm not sure that they would want to do event space now, not knowing what the future is going to be for having 200 people in a building at a time. So those are the things that we just need to be mindful of. But we have a lot of buildings that have vacancy. Some of them have had vacancy for 16 years, ever since I was hired. And now some of them are new adding to it. Plus we have the 2 Bearland or the 2 pits. So we have lots of pluses going on. We're trying to help, the businesses stay afloat, but we also have some property owners with significant vacancy in their building. That's all I had to say about that. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll be talking about places like former J.C. Penney's a lot in the future. Okay, I think that's all. Did we have any other what's happening downtown, or was that?
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, actually, I'm gonna say the positive first. Obviously, if you haven't been to Azul's, it's amazing, and it's had a lot of people there all the time. But then we have Ranch Records and Rapid Refill and Bella Vita. We've had a lot of businesses close. So, you know, it's balancing the new with the challenges some have had to stay in business. I forgot to say, I put it in my memo, but Kristen and I'm going to try to set up meetings with all the property owners that are on that list to see if there's anything they want to share and to get their thoughts on the future and how we might play a role too.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one quick question. With the bare land and the memo that you sent out, Cherie, you have 195 through 197 Commercial Street as a bare land, but that's where the hotel's going, right? So
yes.
Okay.
It's like the pit, you know, by the former Wells Fargo site. So I just look at those as two sites that don't have anything on them contributing right now. But good
Gotcha.
question.
Okay, I
Thank you.
just want to make sure that was the site you're talking about, since we got
it
some
is.
movement there. And then secondly, I saw the Oregon School Board Association bought the Cliffs Automotive Repair recently, and that's right across the street from the Capitol building. Does anyone know what they are planning to do with that?
I have not heard. It's kind of out of my focus, but I
Not
wouldn't
heard
be
that.
surprised if they did parking garage. That's what I'd put there.
The transaction just closed on Monday, so I just figured, I don't know, so I would open it up.
The mayor would be a good person to ask that question.
Should have asked him.
He probably
Maybe
knows.
next time. Okay. All right, that's all I had.
Email him, Tyson.
Yeah, I might reach out, and then if I find out, I'll let everyone know.
Well, I can add some good news. We are moving forward with the renovations at the Vic building. We got our permits approved, so we are demo has started, and you've probably seen there's some vinyl that's gone up in the windows, and I can attest we are well within walking distance to the new Fork 40 food hall. Been there,
Yes.
and very excited about it.
Thank you,
Nice.
Hillary.
That's exciting. It's gonna be great to have more of a presence from Western downtown. That'll be great. Okay. Unless I see any other hand. Okay, yeah, Linda.
So Cherie, back to Tyson's question, the hotel that we've assumed is coming, are you just trying to find out if that hotel is still in the process, or have they backed out?
I have outreach to them to try to get an update. Obviously, the lodging business has had significant detrimental impacts to them because of this. So I'm hoping that because they were going to use the opportunity zone to help that project, and she has her own fund, Sturgeon has her own fund, that's still on the table, but I have not heard back from my outreach yet.
All right, well, it'll be nice to hear from them with positive news, hopefully. All right.
I agree.
Linda, is the Nishioka building still on pace for winter of 2020?
It is.
Okay, awesome.
In fact, it was a few weeks ahead. I haven't, the last report I got I think they were only a week ahead of schedule. So I think it's going to be very close. If not the end of December, it certainly should be in January. And they already have a waiting list that's filling up. So that's awesome.
Okay, that was gonna be my next question. And Shuri, I'd be happy to help on that subcommittee for the Saffron site as well. But yeah, I think Linda's Nishioka building would be a great barometer to see if housing, what type of demand we have for it downtown. And the fact that it's filling up already is a good sign, I'd say. So
So they're taking a waiting list because they're just a little too early to actually complete a lease. But the last I heard, which was actually even like 2 weeks ago, there was already 15 or 18 on the waiting list.
Ah,
Woohoo!
Great.
Aaron, could I also mention that I understand that Bentley's Coffee is opening on July 3rd.
Oh, yeah.
So that'll be a great addition.
Yeah, absolutely. That did not stay empty long. That's good.
And Cherie, if I know that Tyson raised his hand, he wanted to be on that subcommittee. I don't know how many you wanted on it. If you feel that the mix would be better to have him and not me, just let me know.
No, I would take myself out and leave Linda for having a more female presence.
Oh, well, that was nice.
Oh, nice try, Vincenzo. I'll just have to have more people. I can live with that. She's just gonna be there to help me. 3 to 1. Now it's 3 to 2. Now it's 3 to 2. I'm good.
All right. Well, with that, I think we should adjourn our meeting. Thanks, everybody.
I miss you guys.
Yeah. You too.
miss you all too. This was a good meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Yeah.
you.